Good afternoon, guys. My name is Hunter. You're watching Sportsman Self-Reliance. I took this opportunity to come out today since it has snowed, and the snow is a very wet packing snow. And what I wanted to do for you guys today is I wanted to teach you guys how to start a fire in wet conditions, given that the snow here is very wet and very thick. It is springtime here in Colorado, so the snow here is definitely wet. It's a real heavy packing snow, and it makes it very hard to start a fire in these kind of conditions if you don't know how. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that and collect some of the materials. I'm going to show you guys how to build a proper fire lay and get a proper ignition source. So without much further ado, let's get started, guys. Okay guys, so the first thing I want to talk to you guys about is picking a good location to start your fire. If you're in a survival situation, this is going to be difficult because you're going to have a lot of thoughts and a lot of adrenaline running through your mind. And it's going to be hard to think about these things, but keep in mind when you're in a survival situation, you want to keep your wits and you want to be able to control your mind and be able to slow things down so you can think about these small little details like this. What I'm going to show you here is an area that you don't want to put your fire in, because if you look at this pine tree right here, it's been caked with snow pretty much all the way up and down the pine tree. Now I apologize if you guys can't see that very well, but as you can see on this branch here, given that this snow is very wet, it will cake to the tree very easily, and if you set your fire to it or set your fire below it, that heat will rise and melt the snow off, and you'll get an effect that will shake all this wet, moist snow off the tree and into your fire. And when you're first starting your fire, this is bad. And you can have a blazing fire for a couple minutes, but if that ends up happening to your fire, you're going to lose a lot of heat at one time, and it could end up putting your fire out. So what you want to find is an area that has the snow already shaken off of it, or if you can't find an area like that, you want to shake the snow off the trees before you light your fire. Okay guys, so I found an area here that's pretty decent between these two pine trees because it is flat. There's not as much snow here because it is covered by the pine trees, and it's going to be very easy to clean this area out, and there's not a lot of snow above us hanging in the pine trees that we have to worry about. There's a little bit here and there, but a little bit is not going to put your fire out, and we won't have to worry as much about that as we will in the previous location I showed you in the last video clip. So the first thing we want to do when building our fires, we want to clear this area out of snow, okay? And you want to clear this area out all the way to the ground pretty much, and as you can see, this snow is not very deep, but keep in mind it is heavy and wet, so as much as you can get out of here, the better. So you want to kind of clean an area out here. Now you don't want to just clean an area out for your fire. You also want to clean an area out for your firewood and your combustible materials. That way they're sitting as much off the moisture as possible, so they're not soaking up a lot of moisture, especially if you're getting a lot of dry material. You want to keep that dry if you can. Okay guys, so as you can see, we've kind of cleared out an area here that's large enough for us to build a small fire here. Now obviously in a survival situation, when you have your shelter and you're in conditions like this, you're going to want to build a bigger fire than what I'm going to show in this video. And you're going to want pretty much a body length size fire. That way you can roll the heat in your shelter and keep yourself warm and control your body's core temperature when you're in a survival situation. What I'm going to be showing you here is pretty much a bushcraft fire, and you can make this bigger very easily. All you have to do is add more combustible material. So the area I'm probably going to put the fire is pretty much right here where the camera is showing, right next to this little hole I've dug up here, and it'll be pretty much right in the middle of this circle that we've created with the snow. Now what I want to do, I dug up a stick underneath the snow that was obviously, as you can see, buried underneath the snow, and we can use this as a digging stick to kind of create a little bit of an area underneath this ice pack. That way we can help increase the chances of getting a fire going by decreasing the amount of frozen moisture that we have on the surface. Now we're not looking to get a whole lot out of this, obviously. We just kind of want to minimize the risk of putting out our fire. put my mittens on here. My fingers are getting a little cold. Pretty cold out here today. Probably about 20 degrees right now. At least the wind stopped. So we want to break all this ice up and kind of create a little bit of an area here. And if we have to move over, that's okay. It's not going to really hurt a whole lot. So I'm going to start digging a hole. Not a very large one. We're not really making a pit here. We're just trying to get beneath the snow. Just make a little dirt hole that we can start our fire on. Once we get an ember base, this will be less of a problem. Okay guys, so we've kind of dug out a little hole here. Get all this dirt out of the way. This is where we're going to start our fire. Now I'm going to keep that stick because we can use it for something else down the road, I'm sure. So we've got a little hole here that's just below the surface of the frozen ground. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab some spare sticks, some dry firewood or whatever, and we're going to lay that here to keep our tinder bundle and our fire lay off the moist ground. And it will also be able to make it easier, I should say, to get our ember base going faster. We want to look for our firewood first before we look for our tinder bundle, because we don't want to take the chance on getting our tinder bundle wet before we use it. So we want to collect our firewood, keeping in mind that preparedness is key and that we want to have a steady source of firewood near our fire lay before we ignite our fire. That way, if we need more at one time, we don't have to go very far to find it and risk the chance of putting our fire out. So this is kind of what we're looking for here. All these dry branches, you can tell they're dry and dead because the tree itself is dead, at least all the way to the top. And you can always tell when something is a little bit more dry than other things because it has that sharp crack to it. If I can break this off here for you guys. As you can hear, that stuff is really, really dry because it breaks right off. Obviously, an axe or a saw would be a very good resource to use in this situation, but I didn't bring a whole lot out here with me, so I'm just going to have to do this by hand, but that's okay. Obviously, if you're in a survival situation, you don't have a lot of equipment, you can get very decent firewood just by looking at the dead branches that you find on trees like pine. Pine trees produce a lot of dead branches. So I'm going to collect as many of these as I can. We can use these for not only our fire lay, but we're mainly looking for firewood right now. The wood we're going to look for our fire lay, is going to be pencil size and smaller. As you guys can hear that swift crack. Okay guys, so as you can see, we've collected a pretty good amount of firewood, or at least enough to get a sustainable fire, and I think that's important when dealing with fires, that you want enough firewood, not necessarily to last you forever, but enough to get you a sustainable fire or ember base. That way, after you get your sustainable fire, you can go out and search for more firewood if you have to. But this will do enough for what we need it to for today. So now the next thing we want to do, or the next thing I want to do, is I want to show you guys that I collected all this firewood and that there's plenty more around this little campsite, and that is very proximal, and that's very important. So if I pan the camera around for you guys, I can show you exactly where we got our firewood. As you can see, between these two pine trees, there's a bunch of snow tracks down there, and that big pine tree in the back is where we collected all of this firewood. And there was even a dead standing tree that was above the snow line that I picked up and processed down a little bit smaller as well. But my point is that it was all very proximal to our campsite, and it saved us a lot of energy, time, and calories that we may not have in a survival situation, and it's easier to get it that way as well. So that's very important, that you want to look for resources that are near the camp you choose. Now, the next thing we want to find is our lighter, more kindling style firewood, the stuff that we're going to use for our fire lay. Now, to find that, again, it's going to be very close to our campsite. As you can see, this pine tree right here has a lot of dead standing branches that are pencil-sized and smaller, as you can see. And it has quite a few of those. And if we pan around even more, there is another tree right here, again, a pine tree that has a lot of these smaller twigs and networks of small pine boughs that have died over the years. And these will work really well because they provide our smaller stuff on top of our bigger stuff, and it comes in one package. You can find a lot of different trees that have this, obviously. Pine is what we have in Colorado, or at least in my area, and pine works really well for this also because of the trace resin that you might find in these branches as well. Makes these branches a little bit more combustible, and they're really dry. As you can see here, it breaks off very easily, and it has all this network of smaller and larger branches all in one, and it makes it very easy to build a fire lay with this. So we want to collect as much of this as possible so we can get back to building our fire lay, and then we can work on finding our tinder bundle and igniting that. Okay guys, so as you can see, we've got quite a bit of small, fine, skeleton-like material, and all of which we collected close to our camp, which is very important. Obviously, if you have a camp that is not close to these resources, you're going to have to travel a little bit farther to get to them. But if you can, you always want to be looking and have that badger mentality when you're setting up a camp, that resources are available around you. So we have quite a bit here that we can use for our fire lay. Now we want to prepare our fire lay before we go collect our tinder bundle. And I have this stick here, and it's just an old aspen tree that's broken and is dead. Now what we're going to do with this is we're going to break this down and use this for the base of our fire to keep our fire lay off the moist ground. So I'm going to break this up into small pieces, and 3 will work. And as you guys can see in this little hole that we dug earlier, what you want to do, make sure you guys can see this on the camera. What you want to do now is you want to take these 3 pieces, if I can keep from falling here, you want to take these 3 pieces of wood. Now, if you have more, that's great, but if you don't, this will work. And you pretty much want to build your fire lay around that. And we can even take some more of our firewood, just a little bit more, to make a suspension system, or a bridge if you will, off the moist ground that we can set our tinder bundle on. And it'll also make it easier to kind of get an ember source, or an ember base, faster. So we just want to stack that up, and that'll pretty much be enough right there in that small little hole. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to build our fire lay. We have all these small twigs here, and we have probably a lot more than enough. And the best way to build your fire lay, in my opinion, is just kind of chaotically throw it around. Obviously, you're going to want to work with this a little bit more, but it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as you can still keep your tinder bundle or your bird's nest off the ground and still have a good fire lay, that's pretty much all you need. Now we want to take this, and you kind of want a teepee fashion and stack it up around the back, as you guys can see. And I'll get a close-up for you guys once I finish doing this. But I want to take a lot of my small stuff, and this really dead pine is really good for this because it kind of forms together and meshes together really well, and it doesn't take a lot of time or effort to do this. And we can break that up as we need to. Like I said, we probably have a lot more than enough to get this going, but we want to stack this up good and high, keeping a cavity in the front that we can use to put our tinder bundle into. So we want to take all this small stuff and kind of stack it around the back, like I said, and make a little network, if you will, of all these very small twigs like this one, and increase the amount of small surface area, which makes it easier to combust. And you want to use your smaller stuff on the bottom here because you want to put your tinder bundle up underneath. And what you want to combust with this tinder bundle is these really small fiber-like pieces of wood, which will eventually rise up into the larger pieces of wood that are pencil-sized, thumb-sized, and larger. And they will pretty much fall down on top of each other to give you a good ember base. And we want to take this stuff that has some of the dead pine needles on it as well. And those pine needles have a lot of pine resin in them, and that pine resin goes up like gasoline. Okay, so we have a pretty good fire lay here, and we just want to make sure we have a cavity here that we can use to put over our tinder bundle. Now what we want to do is we want to go find our tinder bundle, and then we can work with this fire lay a little bit more and get it perfected around our tinder bundle. So stay tuned, guys. Okay guys, so I've been looking around here around my campsite, and I couldn't really find anything for a decent tinder bundle, so I had to go a little bit further away from my campsite to look for this. But this is pretty much what we're looking for, and this is the best option in wintertime in the western mountains. And this is pretty much just dead, or I wouldn't say dead, but dry grass. And it's not really dry, I guess, because obviously it snowed, and a lot of that snow is covering a lot of the stuff that we want. But what you're really looking for in a situation like this is the grass that is sticking above the snow line or above the surface of the snow. And that stuff is the stuff you're looking for, like this here. And that's going to be drier than the stuff that is obviously lower and buried underneath the snow. So what we want to do is we want to collect a good amount of this, because this is our best resource for this situation, and we want to grab as much of this as possible and stick it in a pocket or a coat pocket or underneath our coat next to our core, but not next to our skin. That way, if it is moist or wet, we can dry it out as we head back to our campsite. So I'm going to collect a good amount of this, and we'll head back to our campsite. Okay guys, so we've come to a frozen pond that is nearby, and this is a pretty good resource because, as you can see here, now I'm not sure if you can see this very well, I'll get a zoom up on the camera, but we have cattail heads. These are very multi-purpose because we can not only use these to start our fire because of the dried matter on the inside now, but if we have some way to char material back at the fire, we can also take this back and char it and use it for our next fire as well. So it's a very good resource, but what I'm interested in mainly is getting one of these bigger ones, these hot dog size ones, if you will, if I can get to it here, and breaking that off. And if you break that open, it's full of small fibers, but this is a really good resource that we can use for starting our fire now. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that with my other tinder bundle material and see what else I can find around these dry lake beds. As you can see, there's quite a bit of dead reed grass and a lot of different species of dead grass around watered areas in the summertime, and it really makes good tinder bundles when the grass is dead. So I'm going to collect as much of this as possible and get a very good tinder bundle with dead grass and cattails, and we can take this back to camp and use this for our combustion and ignite our fire. Okay guys, so we have our fire lay here, and we've got the elements of our tinder bundle separated into two groups. I have one bit of grass, kind of dead dry reed grass right here, and another big bundle of reed grass and a cattail right here. The first thing I want to do, since our combustion or our source of flame is going to be a ferro rod, is we want to take some of this and we want to process this down into finer material. And to do that, the easiest way to start that off is to just kind of separate it and give it a little airspace, and then just start moving it around like this. And that's going to break it apart into several different groups, and it's going to tear those little bits of leaves of the grass, and it's going to tear the blades of grass up into small fibers. So we want to do that aggressively. This stuff is a little bit damp, but it's not soaking wet, so it shouldn't be too hard to get it lit with a ferro rod. But we just want to process this down for a while. Now, this is something that I think a lot of people don't do, and a lot of people can't get fire because they don't take the time to prepare the fire. They don't build the proper fire lay, or they don't prepare their bird nest properly, and a lot of people can't get fire because of that. Even if you're in a survival situation, you always want to take your time when dealing with your elements of fire. Fire is one of those things that you have to be tedious about, because if you're not, it won't work. So we just want to keep processing this down, and we're creating a lot of surface area, as you guys can see, with this grass. And we want to just keep moving it around like this and keep increasing our surface area. Separate that and rip it apart. And we want to take our time with this, like I said before, because this is our ignition source, okay? This pretty much is what we want to give us our flame. The ferro rod will give us the spark, but this grass, this small bit of tinder bundle here, is going to give us our flame. And that's going to ignite our bigger piece of tinder bundle there, bird's nest, whatever you want to call it, and it's going to burn long enough, in theory, to rise up into these smaller twigs and pretty much give us the fire that we're looking for. So I just want to take my time with doing this. Now all of this stuff that's fallen out, we can put that right on top, and we can collect that and recycle this. We don't want to waste it. Okay, so we can break this up even more. Rip it up and keep doing this rolling motion friction process, and that's going to pretty much break up the tinder bundle into small parts. As you can see, we're getting a lot of fine hairs, a lot of this real fine surface area, and that's the stuff that the ferro rod is going to ignite. So now what we want to do is we want to take the remainder of our grass. As you can see, I've collected quite a bit of it here. We want to kind of create a little cavity and break that up and mix it together really well, make sure that it's all one unit pretty much. And what we want to do is we want to take that grass and we want to create a cavity with that grass like this. Now I'm sure you guys have seen this a lot before. Take my little bit of grass here and set that to the side. And I can throw all of this stuff on the top of my fire lay and it's not going to really hurt anything. But as you can see, we want a little cavity here. Now, I'm sure you guys have seen this before. And it's going to look similar to that of a bird's nest. And we can bundle this together with some sort of jute twine or a cordage of some sort if we wanted to. I don't think that's really necessary right now. But what we're going to do is we're going to take our finer grass and we're going to set that right on top or inside the cavity. And we're going to set that on the ground here. Break this up a little bit more and make it ideal for starting with a ferro rod. That's the goal. Okay guys, so I've processed this tinder bundle up, this very fine grass up a little bit more, and I spent a little bit more time with it, and I've got some really, really good fine stuff that we're going to use with our ferro rod and our knife to pretty much strike our fire. Now what you want to do when you're ready to ignite your tinder bundle is you want to take and plant your knife, the butt of your knife, against your knee or your leg, and you want to strike that ferro rod by applying downward force on the back of the knife and pulling the ferro rod towards you without moving the knife. That way you're not blowing your tinder bundle away. And you want to be as close to that tinder bundle as possible. Really well. And here we go. Now, once you get a flame, you want to turn that tinder bundle around on itself and move it around as you have to, or as it's necessary. And you pretty much just want to turn it on itself. Once you get a good flame going, it kind of fell apart on me here. But once you get a good flame like you see here, you want to lift your fire lay and put it over the top of your tinder bundle. Just like this. Again, it kind of fell apart on me, but that's okay. Scrape some of that stuff. And you want to put your fire lay over that exposed flame. If you have to move it around, it's not hurting anything to do that. But once you start seeing that flame rise above the initial canopy, you can take more of your firewood, some of this larger stuff, and you can process this down and throw it right on top, just like this. Now we don't have a sustainable fire at this point just yet, I'm going to put my knife back in its sheath and my ferro rod away, so that way I don't lose them. And you basically want to take the time to nurture that fire at this point and add the firewood necessary to get this thing sustainable. Well guys, I appreciate you guys joining me for this video, and I hope I actually taught you guys something today. I hope that if you have any comments, suggestions, or questions, that you will post them in the comment boxes below and let me know and inform me of any suggestions that you might have, any new tips or tricks that you might have. I'd be glad to hear them. I appreciate you guys joining me for this video. I'm going to stick with this fire until it's safe, and until the next one, I'll see you guys later. Thank you guys for watching.